Dr. Gary Chapman, it is an honor to meet you and have you on Let's Parent on Purpose. Thank you so much for your time today.
Well, thank you, Jay. I'm glad to be with you.
Now, you are, I'm sure, outside of your family circle, probably most known for the five love languages, which I believe came out of your counseling practice, right? As you were seeing um, different scenarios repeat themselves over and over again in the people that you were counseling. And that book has been life-changing for me and for so many. So just want to first off say thank you for writing it, but it's not the only book that you've written, right?
That's correct. They told me the other day, my publisher, that I've written over 60 books. And I said, when did I write all those books? But the love languages has been the bestseller of all of them, of course. Yeah. They told me it sold 20 million copies now,
My
which
goodness.
absolutely blows my mind. But I
Yeah,
think
well,
it's
I,
because
I probably got half a dozen of those because I'm good at reading but bad at keeping track of things. So lose one, have to get another one on there. So.
yes, yes. Yeah, I think that book addresses the deep need, to feel loved, which all of us have. And
Yeah.
if you're married, you certainly want to feel loved by your spouse. And if you do, life is beautiful. If you don't,
Mm-hmm.
then life is kind of hard. So, yeah, I think that's why the book is sold so well. And God, of course,
Yeah.
God's hand's been upon it, just helping people know how to keep love alive in their marriage.
Yeah, absolutely. Today, we're going to focus on a new book that has just been released. Do you know when this was released? The
I,
Five
I
Traits of a
don't.
Healthy
I
Family.
think I think it was last year, but
Okay.
I don't remember the
Okay.
date. Yeah.
You have a book, The Five Traits of a Healthy Family, for those looking on YouTube. That's what it looks like if you go to look for it. And I have just been looking through it, recently got a copy and love this material. First off, I'd just be curious, you have on the front the five traits of a healthy family. How do you determine what healthy is? Like, where did you come up with, when I look at your topics, certainly those are traits of a healthy family, but how do you define healthy as we go into this?
Well, that's really why I wrote the book, because I've had so many people in my office over the last 30 years who say, Gary, I grew up in a dysfunctional family. I don't know what a healthy family looks like. And so I went to the scriptures, really. The
Mm-hmm.
foundation of this book is Ephesians chapter 5 and the first few verses of chapter 6. And just asked myself, what's this teaching us? And these are the five things that just jumped out at me that are there in a healthy marriage. So obviously, people who are not Christians or don't refer to scriptures may have different ideas on what a
Mm-hmm.
healthy family looks like. But I don't think anybody would deny that if you can have these traits in your family, you're going to have a healthy family. And so that's what I'm trying to encourage.
Yeah, you mentioned growing up in a dysfunctional family, and I've been in student ministry for 25 years at this point. Um, I, I realized that many times a young person and even adult will be able to recognize that they were in a dysfunctional family, but having the goal of I'm not going to be like my mom and dad
Yeah.
isn't enough to actually get you where you're going to go. And we actually had a retreat this past weekend where this came up, and it's like if you can't just have a negative goal. Like if you don't know what you're
Hmm.
actually aiming towards, it's not enough to
Right.
just run away from something. You have to be going towards something. And I think you've done a great job of articulating the different traits. And so I would love to just, if we have time to dive in a little bit to each one of these and
Sure.
you tell why this is important. And if somebody doesn't have it, what's the pathway to get there? So you have in here in chapter 1, the very first one you talk about is families who serve. And I'm curious of all the possible things to lead off with. Why is it that service within the family and as a family, why did you pick that one to come out of the gate with?
Well, I think because if we don't have an attitude of service, we're not likely to be able to do any of the other traits. And in
Yeah.
the scriptures, pretty strong words when it says the husband's to love his wife as Christ loved the church. What did Christ do for the church? He died for the church. The greatest service
Mm-hmm.
could ever been done. And the wife says, it says, wives, submit yourselves to your husbands as to the Lord. You serve him like he was Jesus. Whoa, both of those are powerful. And on the human perspective, probably impossible apart from the Holy Spirit's work in our lives. But I think if we don't have that attitude of service, we're not going to have a healthy family. And that means the husband has to have an attitude of service toward his wife. I want to do everything I can to help you become the person you believe God wants you to be. She has the same attitude toward him. And then they are serving the children if they have children. Then they're teaching the children how to serve each other, how to serve mom, how to serve dad. You grow up in a serving family, boy, you're set up for a positive road ahead when you get to be an adult. And so I think that attitude is so important. And I think, it has to start with the parents, obviously. If the parents don't have the attitude, the kids aren't going to get the attitude. And that whole
Hmm.
concept of serving each other in the family. Dad does things for us, mama does things for us. And now you have at appropriate ages, here's something you can do. Here's what you can do for the family, for your sister or your brother or mom or dad. And young children will grab onto that because from the very early ages, they're saying, Mommy, can I help you? Mommy, can I help you? And as you know, by the time they get to be teenagers, sometimes they forgot about that, but but they
Yeah.
do have it early in their life. So I think we're made in
Hmm.
God's image, and God is a God of love, and love expresses itself in service to other people. So I think it's just fundamental to everything else in a healthy family.
You know, um, I was thinking how in our modern societies, like society is designed to split up the family, but through most of human history, children are seen as an asset in the home because the more hands that you have, if you have land, if you have farmland, if you have animals, even in the United States, up through the first couple of 100 years, you the more children you have, like they are needed from the moment they're able to walk and move. You can put them on milking the cow or helping
Yeah,
with meals. And I think sometimes what's happened now is we get so hyper efficient and we're moving in so many areas. People lose meaningful roles in the house and they don't realize that they're a part of a team. And when
yeah,
you don't think you're part of a team, you can think that it all exists for you.
yeah,
I was thinking of, as you were talking about moving into the teenage years, we had something a number of years ago in our church where we were trying to figure out the policy for teenagers serving in children's ministry. And there
mm,
was kind of this back and forth argument because there were some that wanted to say, well, the middle schoolers aren't terribly helpful in there. And so we want to wait until they're in high school before they serve. And being the youth pastor, I pushed back and said, yeah, I understand there's a sense in which they're not super helpful. But if you have this critical time period of 11, 12, 13 years old where you're telling them you're not allowed to serve, how in the world do you expect that all of a sudden when they hit 14, 15, and 16, they're gonna want to serve? Like you have to breed
yeah,
that when they're young, and then it's much easier when they're older. But if you cut them out of that and say you're not worthy, you're not wanted, um, you know, they're not going to jump back into it as they get older. And I think the same thing in our
yeah.
households.
Absolutely. I fully agree with that. And I think as parents, we start young, giving them appropriate jobs to do, things they can do at their age level. And if we bring them up like that,
Hmm.
then they come to adulthood and they have this attitude of service, which is a great asset.
Absolutely. So families who serve, and that's serving one another first and foremost within the home, and then finding a mission greater than your home
Yeah.
outside to serve in. Your local church is certainly a great area. Your neighbors, there's so many opportunities. There's more opportunities than you have time. So it really shouldn't be hard to find a place to serve. And from there, you go the next one: husbands and wives who relate intimately. Why is this so critical? And what do you mean by relating intimately?
Well, in the very beginning, when God said it's not good for man to be alone, the word means isolated. And his answer was the creation of Eve and the institution of marriage. And then he said, the two of you will become one flesh. Now, some people apply that only to the physical aspect, but it's far deeper than that. It's an intimate relationship intellectually. We're sharing our lives with each other intellectually, sharing ideas and concepts. And we're sharing our lives emotionally. We're sharing our emotions with each other, whether they're positive or whether they're negative, so they know where we are emotionally. Uh, it's social intimacy. We are doing things together as a unit, and sometimes it's at church, sometimes it's other places, but we're doing things together with other people, and and it's also spiritually. We're sharing our journey with God together. So I think, and yes, physical intimacy is a part of that, to be sure. But in a marriage, a healthy marriage, there's a deeply intimate relationship. And if you talk to people who have divorced, they will tell you that there was a long time before they divorced that they weren't connected.
Mm-hmm.
They were just living in the same house, but they were disconnected from each other. Marriage finds its meaning in being intimate with the other person, sharing life with the other person at such a deep level on all levels of life. And that brings for a satisfying marriage when you have an intimate relationship with each other. I think that's what God intended for us.
Yeah, I love it. You actually have a chapter on the 5 steps to intimacy, and you talk about sharing your thoughts, sharing your feelings, spending time together, opening your souls together, and then finally opening your bodies together. And you have in some marriages, I think especially the husbands that want to just jump to sharing their bodies together,
Yeah.
which if you don't share your ideas and your thoughts and your feelings and times, doesn't feel like intimacy to your spouse,
Yeah.
and how these all build on one another. I heard a definition of intimacy that we've used over time. Intimacy is knowing somebody and being fully known without fear of rejection.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that definition.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I want with God. I want to know God and be fully known and not be afraid, not hide like they did in the garden. And the same thing with our
Yeah.
spouse, but that comes
Yeah.
through these steps that you talk about, all the way from the sharing of feelings to the sharing of souls and the sharing of bodies. Um,
Yeah.
if where do you feel like is if a couple is struggling with intimacy, and that's
Mm-hmm.
broken down, is there a good place to start? Like how do they reconnect when things have broken down so much? Is there a general good place to start?
I think one place to start, which I think could come early, is praying together. And what
Hmm.
I suggest for couples, because I found that only about 15% of Christian couples pray together every day, if you don't count giving thanks for food.
Wow.
Okay. And so what I say is,
Mm-hmm.
let's start with silent prayer. And here's what I mean.
Hmm.
Hold hands with each other, close your eyes, and pray silently. And when you get through, you say amen, and you hang on till they say amen. And anybody can do that. Certainly, any Christian can do that.
Yeah.
That's not hard. That's starting on a really low level. But you cannot come to God every day together for a few minutes like that, even in silent prayer, and it not begin to affect the way you treat each other. And I say
That's really
sometimes,
good.
in 6 months, one of you might just kind of start praying out loud, and you break the silence. But if you never pray out loud, it'll help your marriage. It'll bring a sense of intimacy because you're coming to God together. I mean, that's the most intimate thing we could be doing, and it'll begin to spill out then, I think, into the rest of life. So I would suggest start there.
That's really good. And I've never thought about that. Start with silent prayer, because I understand
Yeah,
sometimes the emotions can be so raw, or you
yeah,
can feel so vulnerable with your spouse that you're afraid, because praying can
yep,
often be a very intimate and vulnerable thing. And so you can be
yeah,
afraid of being judged or laughed at or made fun of, or escalating the situation with what you pray. So that's
yeah,
a great idea of even just starting with silent prayer, and trusting that the Lord's going to intervene. So
yeah.
wonderful tip. Um, all right. So we have families who serve, husbands and wives who relate intimately. Next, you talk about parents who guide. Um, don't all parents guide?
Yes, in a negative or a positive way. you know, the King James words, it says, bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
And those two words are very different. One emphasizes words, and the other emphasizes actions. So this is the way we train our children. We use words to teach them ideas and concepts that relate to truth as revealed by God. but we also use actions to teach them things. Uh, and these two always go together. I remember, for example, my son's a teenager, and I would go once a month down to the juvenile detention center and play ping pong with the young guys on Saturday night and talk with them. And I started taking him with me. And we would sit down and talk to at least one or two of the students, the inmates. And then I'd walk home and I'd say, Derek, isn't that sad, son? I said, he's your age and he broke the law and now he's incarcerated. And he felt it. I could have said to him, don't drive under the influence, or don't do this, or don't, I could lay out the laws of God, but when you let him see the consequences of disobeying the laws of God, then it sinks deeper in the child. So words and actions always go together. And in our culture, I think some people lean to one or the other. There are parents who have the attitude, don't ask me why, you do it because I said do it, Okay. And there are others who say, look, children are smart. You just explain what you want them to do and why you want them to do it, and they'll get it and they'll do it. But if they don't do it, these parents get loud. Now, I've told you one time already. No, words and actions. I sometimes use this illustration. So the mother's fixing dinner, and it's almost over, and she goes to the door. Johnny's in the backyard playing with a neighbor, and she says, Johnny, dinner. Little Johnny keeps on playing. And 2 or 3 minutes later, she does the same thing. And then a third time. But the fourth time, she says, Johnny, get home. And Johnny comes home. Why did he come home with number 4 and not number 1? Because he knows that if he doesn't come home when mother says, get home, she'll walk down there, take him by the hand, and lead him home. And he does not want mother in the neighborhood. So he comes home on the 4th call. So I say to the mother, it's okay for me if you want him to come home on the 4th call. But if you'll tell him that you want him to come home on the 1st call, and if he doesn't, you're going to come down and walk him home. You will not walk him home at one time, and he'll come home because you put words and actions together. So I think if parents get that concept, words and actions, this is the way we teach our children things not to do and things to do.
Yeah, I have a really recent example of that in my house. We have our driveway. We have a basketball court in our driveway, a nice hoop, and I love getting out there and play with my boys, and I love that they get out there and exercise and play without me. But it's also our driveway, so there's often a vehicle in there. My boys are teenagers, and they have gotten in the habit of using my truck as the platform to put their phone on or their headphones on or whatever. And I know there's going to come a day where I just drive off and there's going to be an expensive phone on my bumper. And then that phone's not going to exist anymore. It's almost happened a couple times. We've talked about it and it's not getting through. But I don't want to yell at them for it. So I came up with a win-win last night. Well, it's a win for me. I just went in and announced to them, hey, from now on, my truck is completely off limits as a rest for any of your electronic devices. And anytime that I find them on there, I'm going to take them and you have to buy them back for $5 from me. And I said, and that's, $5 is going to stink, but it's a whole lot better than several $100s to replace it when I smash over it when I back out. But sometimes you've tried to explain, then you want to get to actions. I don't want to get to where I'm, yelling and screaming at my kids over this stuff, because I don't even think that will work. But we have to transfer the cost of the issue over to them, but do it in such a way where it's not, we're not trying to crush their spirit, but we're trying to change their behavior. And it's still an experiment, this whole thing, what works for one kid doesn't work for the other kid. What works right now may not work in the future. And so you got to stay flexible in there. But I don't want to parent out of anger as much as I can, because if I parent out of anger, I'm training my kids to be angry as well. And I think that's a lot of what you're getting at with that, just with words.
That's exactly right. And that's why when you put words and actions together, they're far more likely to be responsive, and you're less likely to lose it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But man, it's hard. It's really easy to talk about on a podcast, but depending on your wiring and the specific wiring of at least one of your kids, it can be very hard. So that's, I think your numbers number 3 leads really well into your 4th one. So parents who guide, I think leads into children who obey and honor their parents.
Yeah.
Why does obedience matter so much with our children?
I think because it's so central to the Christian life. You know, Jesus said, if you love me, you will obey me. It's just that simple. And so I think we want to teach our children obedience. And again, it's words and actions to be sure. So I say to parents, whenever you lay down a guideline on something they should do or not do, you always tell them the consequences of what will happen if they don't do it. It's exactly what you did. You know, you told them the consequences. And so I say, you know, if you have a rule that we do not throw the ball inside the house, if you do, the ball goes in the trunk of the car for 2 days and you lose the privilege. I remember when my son was a teenager, I said, now, Derek, every night when you finish riding your bicycle, you put it in the shed. And if you don't put it in the shed and you leave it out all night, you lose the privilege of riding the bike the next day. Fair enough? Yeah, Dad, that's fair. Okay. So now he knows and I know what the rule is and what the consequences are. So when he left it outside one night, I said, Derek, son, you remember the guideline, right? If you don't put it in the shed, you lose the privilege to ride the bike today. He said, oh, Dad, but all the guys are going to be riding this afternoon. Dad, let me ride today, honey, today and not tomorrow. And I said, son, I can understand how you feel. And if I were in your shoes, I'd probably feel the same way. And I know you like to ride with your kids. But remember, the rule was clear. Both of us understood it. If you don't put it in the shed, you lose it the next day. He never kept it out of the shed another time all through the teenage years. He always put it up. When you suffer the consequences, that's the way children learn to obey, is suffering the consequences.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
If children don't learn
do you find that a
to
lot
obey
of
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to ask, do you find that a lot of parents really struggle with following through with that? Because, you know, what if your heart was broken because you know how much fun it is to ride with his friends and you don't want him to miss out? Do you find that it's not setting up the consequence, it's following through? And then what happens if you don't follow through? What message is that sending?
It communicates the idea that there's always a way out, that the rule really doesn't matter. You can break the rule. There's a way out. You know, the parents will cave in. That's why I think we have to be loving in the discipline, but we have to be firm in the discipline because that's life, you know, and the child has to respect the parents as the leaders in the family. You know, if they don't learn to respect us and our authority, what are they going to do when they get to be adults? They won't respect the authority of the laws of the land, and they'll do things because, you know, well, that doesn't really matter. You don't have to do that, you know. Loving and consistent. Those are the keys, I think, in helping children learn how to obey. And then later, honor parents. Honor comes after obedience.
Yeah. Can you explain what is the difference between honor and obedience?
Yeah, I think honor means that they not only respect us as their parents, but they are grateful to us as parents. And they will express that. They recognize that we do many, many things for them, and they come to recognize that. And as they get older, it becomes even more important, I think. You know, my mother lived to be 99, but the last 9 years, she went downhill mentally. And I had sitters with her around the clock, you know, day and night, all that time. And I would go down every week to see her. She lived an hour away. I'd go down every week to see her and do whatever I could, you know, just to experience life with her. I made sure that my 2 adult children knew what I was doing. Because someday I might be in Mama's place.
That's good.
So as adults, we honor our parents by taking care of them and doing what we can, you know, as they get older and they need more help. And so we honor them by doing what we can to help them.
Yeah. You know, that's a running conversation that I have with students is we talked about dysfunctional families early on. Of the biblical command, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. It's the first commandment with a promise. And learning that I can honor mom and dad, even if I don't agree with mom and dad. I can honor mom and dad, even if they're doing dishonorable things, and trusting that God will reward that in my life. And part of, I think, the reward is by learning to honor them. even if they haven't done well. I think that's one of the ways that you break that generational cycle of dysfunction,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
man, you see so many people that just fall into bitterness and anger and rebellion with it. But if you can learn to honor somebody who hasn't done the best job, then I think that's
Yeah.
something God really blesses and rewards in life. And it is beyond just simple obedience. And it's
Yeah.
something that, as an adult now, I think that I'm largely free of that children obey your parents, not completely, but largely free of it.
Yeah.
But I am absolutely bound to honor my father and mother, until the day that they're with Jesus, and then even honor their
Yeah.
memory after that. I
Yeah.
love that. Uh, the last section of your book is husbands who love and lead, and this is one I feel like is just an epidemic in our society of uh, of boys who shave, and maybe make an income, but they're still boys and they're running homes, but they're not really running homes. So what does it mean for a husband to lead? When you say that, what do you have
Yeah.
in mind, Dr. Chapman?
Well, I think we should never separate the words loving leader. Some
Mm,
people have read that passage, in Ephesians that says husbands is the head of the wife as Christ is the head of the church. And they use contemporary models. They say, well, what that means is like
mm,
he's the president of the company and she's the vice president, or he's the general who tells her what she's going to do. I say, no, 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 no.
mm.
The model is in the text. He's the head of the wife as Christ is the head of the church. What did the head of the church do? Died for the church. He is a loving
Yes.
leader. He is leading by loving her and loving his kids and serving his kids. And and so many wives have said to me, Dr. Chapman, I would love for him to take the lead. I would like for him to call the family together for devotions, for example, every night. To me, that would just be wonderful if my husband would do that. So we're the loving leaders, but it doesn't mean
Hmm.
we're dictators, and telling her what to do and all that. Listen, we're partners.
Right.
We're on the same team. God made us for each other. But the husband takes the lead in trying to do all the things that are
Hmm.
listed there in the other four things. And
Hmm.
and a wife will never resent a loving leader. She will resent
Yeah.
a husband who is an authoritarian leader, telling her what to do, and she has to do what he
Hmm.
says. Yeah. But we're loving leaders,
Yeah.
and I
It would
think that's
be.
the way God designed it.
Yeah, it would be a terrifying thing, as a woman, to live under a man who views his role as the king of the castle,
Yeah.
where everybody
Yeah.
else is his subjects to do his whim. But if Christ
Yeah.
is our model, he was the chief servant, and the first one to lay down himself to die. And I
Yeah.
think that's something that, is much safer to submit to and honor. And it's
Yeah.
something that it's the order that the Lord made, and it works,
Yeah.
when everybody leans into their role. It works. But I think first and foremost, the encouragement is that husbands, if you'll lean into your role, it's so much easier for everybody else to come under their own role.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, Dr. Chapman, I love the content of this book. I appreciate, you unpacking it for us today. Where's the best place? Now, your book's the nice thing when I say where's the best place to get them everywhere, is at this point the best place to get your books. Is there one in particular that you find most helpful to send people to if they want to find out about this one and just the other work that you've done?
Yeah. Yeah. If they want to find out not only, as you say, this one, but other works, if they go to the website, 5lovelanguages.com, the number 5lovelanguages.com, they will see, if they look at resources, they'll see all my books there with descriptions of them. They can be ordered on that website if you like. Obviously, you can always go to Amazon as well. Most of my books are on Amazon as well. But at that website, if you would like to get an email from me on a regular basis, you can sign up for that. There's a lot of things there on that
That's
website.
right.
In fact, There's a test for the 5 love languages. It's there to help you discover your love language, and it's free. They told
Oh,
me
that's
the other
good.
week that 123 million people have taken that free quiz on the love languages to
Whoa.
discover your love language.
Yeah, I did.
so, so there's a
Yeah.
whole bunch of stuff there at that website, 5lovelanguages.com.
Fantastic. As we close, can I ask you, I always feel like if a listener is listening all the way to the end of a podcast, this is something that's really got a hold of their heart. Would you care, as we close, to just pray for the moms and dads, husbands and wives listening, for the health of their families?
Yeah, love to. Father, you know what we're talking about, and you know the importance of the family. You established it. It's the heart of any culture, and you know where we are in our culture today. And I know that there are folks listening who have healthy families and they're growing in healthy families. There are others who do not have healthy families and maybe have never seen one. I do pray that you would use our time today discussing this to give them hope, to let them know that we don't have to stay in an unhealthy situation. We can change it, but we start with changing ourselves, not by trying to make the other person change. So I pray that your spirit would touch the spirits of all who are listening to us today, wherever they are in the journey, and give them not only hope, but let them know that you're with them and you will help them when they begin to take steps to create a healthy family. In the name of Christ, I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Jay. It's good to be with you today.